Welcome to the First Thought podcast at Galway International Arts Festival. I am Paul Fahey, Artistic Director of the festival, and in this series you will get a slice of the festival you can listen to anytime, anywhere. Tune in for fascinating First Thought talks, First Thought backstage, final hours and more. You can listen back to all episodes via giaf.ie or find First Thought on any podcast platform.
Right. Good evening, everyone. It's lovely to see you all here, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the first Galway International Arts Festival Vinyl Hours of 2023. So you hear it on the first day. As Jack said, my name's Tiernan Henry, and I've been hosting this Vinyl Hours thing for the last number of years. And really, it's a series of conversations tracing the musical journeys or musical journey through the soundtrack of people's lives. And Tom Waits famously said that songs are just interesting things to do with the air. And we in Vinyl Hours think it's not such a shabby business to talk about the songs as well and to listen to them. But more specifically, what we're here to do is to talk about songs that move people and what it is about the song or the tune or the piece of music that moves them. So I have to do the promo stuff now. There'll be a full set list. The Spotify set list will be up on the Galway International Arts Festival's Spotify page. And if you like what you hear, please consider making a donation to the Galway International Arts Festival. It's a non-profit organisation. It brings arts to people in Ireland and around the world. Go to giaf.ie and click donate. But now, for today, our inaugural guest is DJ Moo from Fat Freddy's Drop, who are the first gig tonight in the Big Top just across the field. So please welcome DJ Moo. So
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, the band was formed nearly 25 years ago, astonishingly, in Wellington in New Zealand. And they've released a series of albums starting in 2001 up to 2017. They've sold nearly 500,000 albums, and they've won pretty much every award that there is to win in New Zealand's music industry. More importantly, I think, which I think is such an admirable aspect about what they do, is they're an independent group. Everything they do is independent. They make the music themselves, they release the music themselves, they're in control of it all themselves. And importantly, for tonight, they have a formidable live reputation. But for today, we're here to talk to Moo about some of the songs, the tunes, and the music that moves them. So without further ado, we'll get underway. So, Moo, this is a fascinating, distinctive list, and it's, I think, one of these, as you'll hear the tracks, and we'll only be playing a snippet of the tracks, but it's a real invitation to hear what moves you and the kind of things that you hear and the way you hear music as well. And again, when I introduced myself in email to him, I have to apologise, because this is such an unfortunate or an awful thing to do to someone, to say, reduce your soundtrack, reduce all the music you love down to 7 or 8 or 9 tracks if you're lucky. So ideally, we should come back tomorrow night with your second version, and then the next night, and then the next night, until we've covered everything.
Well, like I said to you in the email, my email reply, that it was a ridiculous request.
Yep.
But, so
I acknowledge it.
But what I was prepared to do was just come up with 9 or 10 tunes that contributed and helped shape my personal journey.
Yeah. Good. Well, listen, what we do, maybe we'll just start, we'll get started with this. So your first choice is from 1976. Stevie Wonder, who was 26 at the time, and he released Songs in the Key of Life. It is a sprawling double album that took the Grammy for Album of the Year, Producer of the Year, Best Male Vocal, and Best Male R&B Vocal, all of which went to Stevie Wonder, of course. And it's rightly regarded as one of his best albums. And the awful thing about it is, as a 26-year-old, it was his 18th studio album. So Love's in Need of Love today, Stevie Wonder. Over to you, Moo.
This selection is actually more about the album. But, of course, we had to pick a tune to actually play. I'm not a big fan of ballads normally, but this one I do like. It's mostly made it to the list primarily because it was actually the first record I think I ever bought with my own money.
Right, yeah.
And I inherited a lot of soul records from my older sister. I'm the youngest of 5. But a lot of her selections were quite mainstream and when this album came along, well, I didn't discover it in '76. I discovered it a little bit later. But yeah, it's an incredible album, incredibly Afrocentric, and just there's a lot of different flavours on there. And it's incredibly, it's sophisticated.
And then, what age would you have been roughly? Do you think when you bought it?
I reckon I was about 18.
Perfect age.
Yeah.
And I presume you know every single note on it.
I wouldn't say that, but yeah, it's one of the albums that I always go back to occasionally and have listened, and it's kind of stuck with me as an important start to my vinyl collection, really. And
I mean, I can, as we're listening to it, and we've listened to the other tracks as well, you can really get this sense of the groove that's going right through these tracks. I said it to you earlier when I was listening to some of these this morning, and I couldn't believe how connected the tracks that you picked are. They just seem all to flow into the next one. But and I'm wondering, because you're a producer, when you're listening to something like this, how do you hear it? Or do you do you hear it just as a listener, or do you hear it?
To be honest, I mean, the harder it is to articulate why I like it, I generally find it's probably the better it is. It is a vibe, and with someone like Stevie, who's obviously also blind, I mean, all his albums are amazing. Most of his songs are great, and they're great for both the instrumentation, the musical playing, and also the singing. Yeah. And in particular, "Lovers in the Need Today" is just a great vocal.
Yeah, and effortless. It just seems. Yeah. Well, that's what we do is we'll move on, because we'll stay in the 70s for your second choice, which is Donny Hathaway, and who was from Chicago. And he was a songwriter and a musician himself and a producer, and he worked for Curtis Mayfield for a number of years, but then he released his debut in 1970. And the lead-off single, which is the track that you've picked today, was released in 1969 when he was just 23. But again, just think about, listen to the groove of this as it fits into what we just listened to with Stevie, please. So The Ghetto.
Well, I mean, this Everything Is Everything came out in '69. That version, it got, I think, re-recorded more in the '80s on one of his live albums. It's just the most. I think when I first heard it, was just the most soulful thing I think I'd heard. He's one of my favourite singers. I mean, it's not even really a song. I mean, there's very little lyrics. It's basically a lot of amazing instrumentation and him hitting a chorus every now and then, and that's what and him playing the chords that he's playing on the Wurlitzer just work with the chorus, beautiful. And
those big fat chords.
Yeah. And it's such a moving song that has no lyrics really, but I think even when I wasn't from that time or from that place, but it's quite easy to get transported to and get a sense of a feeling of where he's from and what he was going through. And
I mean, what I find about it as well, I think, and it sounds so immediate, it sounds so current, it doesn't sound at all dated. And I think maybe, I don't know whether that's simply because the way it was recorded and the instrumentation is so simple. But it just works on this notion of a groove. You see, it's not really a song, and it's 6 or 7 minutes long, and it goes by in a flash.
Yeah. Yeah, he's just an amazing singer, I think.
Yeah. So listen, we're going to jump forward a little bit to 1990 and right into, I suppose, what's been called the golden age of hip hop, and that's when Public Enemy released their third album, and it's an elaborate sound collage that incorporates. This is what they say, rhythms, numerous samples, media sound bites, and eccentric loops. But more importantly, Chuck D reckons it's probably their deepest and most complex album, which is Fear of a Black Planet. And it kicks off, and I think, again, when you emailed me, you said, when Moo emailed me, he said with the album choices here, he said he could have picked any track pretty much from any of these albums. But the one we'll listen to and talk a little about is Welcome to the Terror Dome. So Welcome to the Terror Dome by Public Enemy.
Yeah, I think when I discovered this tune, I was going through quite a major growth spurt as far as discovering music, different types of music. I was probably in my early 20s, and I discovered I was at university, which I did very badly at. But in my time at university, I discovered student radio, and back home in New Zealand, student radio was great. It was where you would listen to find new music from all sorts of genres, and the first time I heard it, I couldn't really fathom what the hell I was listening to. It was just like sirens. It was kind of like the first time we heard a turntable used as an instrument, and obviously a very a vocal take that had plenty of attitude, and also I think it landed. A big part of that song was its involvement in "Do the Right Thing." Also, it was like a double header. Really, I discovered Spike Lee. That song was a big part of that soundtrack, and it kind of led me down a path of discovering, trying to find out more about hip hop music. And when I first heard it, I was going, "What the hell is this?"
And so, say when you were around 20 or so, were you playing music already at that stage yourself?
I was, it was early in my sort of collecting days of vinyl. And I was doing shows on daytime shows and discovering music, and it was very eclectic for me at that time. I was listening to Public Enemy, I was listening to Fugazi, I was listening to REM, early REM. It was just student radio in New Zealand at the time was just playing the best of all kind of underground music, and it's a great place to hang out and be involved and learn about stuff that wasn't so mainstream.
And is that like the people that you were starting to hang around with?
I think it was
that through the music.
It was the beginning of me. Sorry, it was the beginning of me beginning my crusade of basically being a musical pain in the ass, and just wanting to, even as a DJ, certainly not play what was too obvious, and to try and, without being arrogant, but to try and educate and provide options for people to listen to, because there's much better music out there than what was happening necessarily on mainstream radio.
Yeah, and I suppose it was probably the same a little bit here in Ireland at the end of the 70s. Like we had to look to England to listen to England. That's where we heard music from. There was a couple of TV programs we'd pick up everything from. And I suppose like student radio, again, I know people in the States would always say this to me as well. It was when they got to college and the student radio was where they found these things, because people would just play everything. They weren't a format show. They would just play whatever they liked, whatever was new.
Yeah, and that was the format exactly at Radioactive where I was working. And I also ended up, after a while, after doing shows, became the production manager, which entailed basically making their ads on an old 8-track tape machine.
Right. And was that your introduction to...
That was probably my introduction to engineering and production, and it was pretty basic stuff. It was an 8-track Atari tape machine, an old Tech Scorpion disc, one microphone. Everything was recorded to these big plastic carts, and at the end of the day, you had to rub the cart over a big magnet to wipe it.
To wipe for the next day.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, listen, we're going to stay in 1990. So actually, these three tracks that we're playing now, we're talking about now, we're all from 1990. Again, this kind of caught me off guard that I just didn't make that connection. So the second track we're going to listen to from 1990 is from D'Angelo, and it's from his second album, which was Voodoo. And it was he'd released an album called Brown Sugar in 1985, I think, which had done really well, and he toured it and had lots and lots of health problems. But when he came back to do the follow-up, he said what he wanted to do was dig back into the stuff that he grew up listening to. So the Stevie Wonder and the Donny Hathaway he said were a really, really big influence on the sound that he wanted to do. And he said he just said he wanted to get to the next level to push it even further. And you can really hear that influence in the track we're going to listen to now. So that's Spanish Joint by D'Angelo.
Yeah, so this is another one that's it's actually probably more as with Stevie, more about the whole album really. But I had to pick one tune, and I thought that was a good one to pick. But this is, I mean, I personally just this album speaks for itself. It's just it could have been a Stevie Wonder album, it could have been a Donny Hathaway album, it could have been, but obviously it was much later, and in particular that track we just heard there, it sounds like a soul track to me with the production, with the drums, very dry, very forward, just a new approach to soul music, really. And I really have to attribute this album to our singer in Factory Shop, Dallas. He kind of brought this album to me. Really. Right. His shtick is really soul music, and he introduced me to this album, and I think we just listened to it for like 2 years solid, and it was just constantly on everything. It was on the car. It was, and for some reason, I think Questlove was involved in this album a lot with the production, and it was like a gift. I can't remember the specific songs, but a lot of the there was 2 songs in particular where they started with just like clean drum hits, kicks, snares. I sampled all of those, and I still use the rim shot till today, because I'm yet to find a better rim shot.
And then I suppose you've started talking a little bit about how did you make that shift then, sort of from just being, you know, like doing the ads in the radio station, to saying, I think we could do live stuff and we could record it, or you were thinking I could record this and I've ideas about how to record things.
Yeah, I mean it was just kind of fairly natural. I started on an 8-track tape machine, and then and for a lot of this music, like later we're going to talk about a track called Quest. I started hearing specifically in hip hop music the sampler and how that could be used, and still today, my main tool for production is still using a sampler, and of course recording live musicians as well on top. But and just so I went and bought a sampler, and most of my education for music production and engineering has all been just self-taught, just through hanging out with like-minded people. And just having to find a way to get some money and buy the gear and learn how to use it, and learning that way. Yeah, and
like a lot with the band, a lot of, like I'd read, but a lot of your earlier albums in particular, you road tested them. You developed the tracks on live, or before you recorded them. And did you think that was a good way, or do you think that's a good way to operate? And did it suit you in terms of arranging things in your head?
Yes, it suited us. I mean, to be honest, I don't see myself that much as a producer. I mean, there are tasks that I can that I'm comfortable with that fit into the job description of a producer, but I really have no interest in learning how to write music, read music. And that's why I surrounded myself with some clever musicians, and we've all got a job. And my job has always been to come up with good starting points, program good drums. And the job that I probably like the most is actually the job of the engineer and running the studio. But I always think that you really can't call yourself a producer unless you really have those deep skills of musical notation. And it's too late for me to learn that stuff.
I think you're still a good producer. I think you can still call yourself a producer. Well, listen, you've mentioned them, so we'll talk a little bit about your next choice is, and it's still 1990. It really was the golden age. This a band from Queens, and they were like D'Angelo. They were sort of leaning back into the soul and like the Stevie Wonder, Donny Hathaway stuff, but they were also going in towards the kind of jazz and reggae and folk as well. And I suppose around the time, there was this notion of an alternative hip-hop, I guess. And the album that they released, which was their debut from 1990, was People's Instinctive Travels in the Path of Rhythm. And I found a really good quote from the source. They described it as a voyage to the land of positive vibrations, which I think is as good a description of anything A Tribe Called Quest does. So, and again, I think you could have picked any track, but it's the opening track that we'll talk about, which is Push It Along. It could only be A Tribe Called Quest. They're such a distinctive sound, haven't they?
Yeah, it's such a natural sounding record, the whole record, and Q-Tip's, a genius poet, and it's just all the vocals just sit on the rhythms very naturally, comfortably. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of ego, more just messages. And I think what hit me when I listened to this record was actually that whole thing about working out how they made this, and just the use of the jazz samples. And I think listening to records like this really led me to get into learning how to use the sampler and start buying. There was a long time there where I'd pretty much would walk into the local second-hand shop in Wellington where I used to buy my records, and I just bought any soul record, any funk record from 1973. Didn't know anything about it. I just bought it, took it home, and started sampling them, and learning, and took a lot of inspiration from albums like this. Really. And
like, as you're learning this, you're teaching yourself, essentially, like teaching yourself into this trade or skill. Like, at what point did you feel confident to say, I want people to hear this, or I think this is good enough to play, or for people to play live or hear?
Yeah, I think it was definitely live.
Yeah, was
the vehicle and the platform for initially before recording.
Yeah.
As such, to actually, and that's the beauty about, and still today how Freddy's operate is I'm on stage with two samplers. Obviously, they're much more modern samplers now, but back then it was an MPC 2000 XL that I went and brought, and was able to put together pieces of music that were generally based around 4-bar loops that had lots of different layers. Hi-hats, kick drums, some sort of chords that had been sampled from somewhere, and drop them in and out, and go on stage with a few musician friends and improvise really, and just see where we could go. And I'll be dropping things out, and also by that stage I was learning how to use studio effects, and so I'd be on stage with a sampler and a mixing desk and a space echo, and initially it was Dallas singing, and Toby Chang, our trumpet player, who's still our trumpet player, and they would come along to we would do it over records as well. I'd go out and get a club. I'd have a club set in a nightclub, and would set up a little bit of extra gear, and I'd play mostly instrumental stuff that was kind of just really groove based, a lot of left field house music, and the guys would just have a jam over the top, and I'd hit them with a bit of space echo, and I think the confidence to move towards recording, and I think first always came from checking these things out live and seeing if anyone actually liked what they were hearing.
And I suppose it gives you the confidence then yourself, or even just as the group when you're recording, that you kind of know what it is you're trying to do. At that point, you've worked out sort of what you...
Yeah, and now further on from then, we definitely will go to the stage early on with kind of a rough arrangement of something, and often that will help us kind of condense that, and get it down to a more solid, because not all the ideas are good. I mean, you just throwing things out there and seeing if they work. If they don't work, get rid of them, and then you just fine tune, and then you kind of generally know when it's working.
I suppose that's probably the hardest part, isn't it? To stop fine tuning it. It's to say, right, that's ready, or we've got it, Yeah.
I mean, I've never ever finished one of our records. I've been dragged away from it, generally by my wife. This done, it needed to be done 5 months ago. Yeah. And you get dragged off it, and because it is that thing where you can tinker, and then you can tinker, and then you tinker so hard, and you actually start to second guess yourself. So it's quite good to have someone that will walk away. That's good. It's good enough. You
can end up in the sandbox, I guess. And we'll go on because like a real influence as well, certainly on you guys, but also on a tribe, is Jamaican Canadian keyboard player and songwriter called Jackie Matube, and he was in loads and loads of groups. He was in the Scatolites and the Sheiks and Sound Dimension. And he's in 1980 he released another one of these extraordinary productive people. It was his 16th album, and it features your next choice, which is Wall Street. So it's a little bit of a shift from what we've been hearing so far.
Yeah, no, this is a tune that came out in 1980, and it's certainly not one that I actually discovered this tune maybe only 10 years ago. Yeah. But I just love the confidence of it, as in. There's probably the recording was probably 5 tracks. There's there's the Rhodes or Wurlitzer there. There's some percussion. There's some drums. There's a bass, and really just the ballsiness. That's it.
It's so simple,
and it's an incredibly hypnotic tune. Yeah. And I just love the simplicity of it. And the funny thing, the 12-inch version, if you've got it on vinyl. You can actually hear. It was obviously done on a tape machine, and they basically play it once through, and then they spliced it together and just played it again. Yeah. And you can actually hear the splice, and it's out of time. It comes back in slightly out of time, and it's just genius. It's just just cheeky, and it's just one of my favourite tunes.
Yeah, and I suppose what I like again about it goes back. You can hear those big fat chords in it, and it goes back. It's even though it's from that Jamaican background, so we're moving into sort of the reggae stuff. You can still see that soul influence as well, where there's really simple ideas, and I suppose as you said, it's this ballsiness or confidence to say no, that we don't need to do any more than that. This is good enough,
Like you said earlier, I think he's a prolific producer who's done a lot of stuff, and I think you learn. You can't teach that stuff. It's just through his the amount of stuff that he's done that he can be that confident. Just keep a tune that simple.
Yeah, and again with you guys. Do you ever would you approach stuff and try and just strip stuff right down to us?
Yeah, I mean a lot of the stuff that we'll go to the stage with something that simple that we kind of feel naturally probably needs more. Yeah, and then build on it. Yeah. But with 8 on stage, it's pretty much impossible for us to keep it that stripped back. Yeah. But I mean that's live is live, and recordings are. Yeah. You can do something different in the studio. You can actually do a bit more production and make production choices to simplify things. Yeah.
And I suppose as well with the tracks we've been listening to, however complex or simple they are, they've got this really good rhythm to them. Like it's hypnotic. Everything we've been listening to, these hypnotic things that just draw you right in, and you can easily see how 6, 7, 8 minutes can go by, and you feel it's just started.
Like I said, I mean, I think they probably, after 4 minutes, decided it wasn't enough, so they just...
Yeah, splice it. Okay. And we'll move on, because this is... I have to read this carefully. It's Moritz von Oswald and Mark Ernestus. They started Basic Channel in Berlin in the 90s, and they've recorded under lots of different names, including Rhythm Sound, which is what we'll be talking a little bit about. And it's with that in particular, that's where they really dig into those Jamaican, that Jamaican dub stuff, and they'll use lots and lots of different types of vocalists to flesh this out. So I suppose it follows on nicely just from the last track, and this one features Cornell Campbell as well. So it's King in My Empire.
I love that record. Yeah, I think Cornell Campbell was one of my favourite reggae singers. And then when he hooked up with those two that you mentioned, Ernestus and Allwood, it's just that whole creation, beginning of creation vibe that they get. It's just so lo-fi. It's incredibly bass heavy. Again, like Jackie Matu, very hypnotic, with this incredible soulful vocal over the top. Kind of just the two favourite things I love, really. Just the simplicity, the heaviness, and an incredibly soulful vocal. And rhythm and sound, I mean, they've got other pseudonyms like all their stuff I love, like Maurizio, which was more on the kind of techno and house and a bit more clubby. But just their production style was just incredible. It was just very fat. And but not too. It's quite lo-fi. Yeah,
and there's a huge amount of space in it. There's all this space just like for the vocal to play around with, and I suppose again I hear that in your stuff as well. I hear you can clearly see these influences, and I don't mean in a negative way, but you can see where you've taken from, these deeper tracks. And it does obviously influence the sound you guys have come up with as well,
And I think we produce, in New Zealand, kind of 18,000 miles away from the main action, and really, a young country that doesn't have the musical history of America or Europe, but I think we benefit from there are not so many rules, and we just. Buy these records, go to the record shop, find these gems, and then just take from all these cool genres and just make it our own thing. Whereas I think if you're maybe growing up a musician in say America, that it's you're probably naturally kind of restricted to this jazz
around you,
soul,
and
probably more kind of musical red tape involved, but we're just pinching stuff left, right, and centre about down there.
You like it, and do you still do that? I mean, do you still like record stores and still like going in and buying stuff and rooting through stuff? And
spend ridiculous amounts of money on the store already.
No, you never admit to the amount of money you spent. Everything was a bargain. That's what you have to say. But you still.
Yeah, I mean that's my main source of my inspiration. I mean. I DJed for a long time, and DJing was definitely my entry into this world of becoming a recording artist and a beat maker. It was all started from initially being a DJ, but I don't DJ anymore. But I still buy just as many records. I'm more a collector now, and I quite enjoy that. I do a reggae show on the same radio station that I started like a million years ago, started on, and I do the reggae show for them once a month, and actually just lately it's helped me kind of focus my record buying just on reggae at the moment. Right. Otherwise, there's too much stuff.
Just too much to keep up with. Yeah. Right, well, we're nearly done. We've just a couple of tracks left, and these are kind of stand alone almost, I suppose, because everything else I felt was this real connection with it a little bit, and. The next one is it's an LCD sound system remix by Theo Parrish, and this was 4533, and it was commissioned by Nike. Astonishingly, they commissioned the band to make a one-track album, and in Nike's words, it was being designed to accompany jogging workouts to reward and push at good intervals of a run. So they obviously knew who they were dealing with in the band. But the band then re-released the album in 2009 just as this set of remixes. And the one you've picked is the Theo Parrish remix. So we'll just listen to a little bit of that. So why this remix one?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're not too familiar with that tune, you really need to go and source it and listen to the whole thing, because it's this choice is more about no disrespect to LCD Sound System. This is definitely, for me, it's all about Theo Parrish. I could have picked some of his own personal sections, but this one in particular, when you listen to the whole thing, he's probably one of my favourite techno producers out there. He's all about surprising you. He's all about celebrating the mistake. And when I say that, I mean things will come in, elements will drop in and out of tunes that are just too loud. But that's how he works. He likes to, and as far as timing goes, he likes to try and move where the one is for you. Like he just puts things in strange places, but when you listen to the whole thing, it all makes sense. And he's just a tricky guy who makes incredibly tasteful techno.
Yeah.
And I want to be like him.
And do you do that, or can you say to the band, "No, I meant that"?
There's nothing more I love than being on stage with the 8 guys that I go on stage with. We obviously can't make music like that. Well, but there's life outside the band. And,
Well, it's a great choice, and so what we do is we'll finish up with your final choice, which kind of moves in again. I suppose it's a little bit about the producer again, and it's Carol Craig that you've picked. It's a Carol Craig track, and he's obviously a leading figure and a pioneer in the second wave of Detroit techno artists in particular. But he's recorded under loads of different names, and he's remixed everyone, from Tori Amos to Depeche Mode and Junior Boys and so on, and produced a vast body of work himself. And your last choice is the song Darkness.
A bit like, for the same reasons I was bigging up Wall Street from Jackie Matu, just incredibly confident that he didn't need beats on this tune. I just love the rhythm of it, and it's just a true celebration of synthesizers and simplicity and that whole hypnotic thing again. And he's a clever guy. He's a little, Theo and him are probably my heroes as far as making techno music go. And Carl's slightly different in that he is a bit more solid rhythmically, and there's not so much about shocking and just incredible taste and use of textures, and but he's a legend.
And when you, again, just go back to the start, I suppose it's just when you listen to stuff like this, do you listen as a producer? Do you listen to it kind of going, how do you do that, or how?
No, I think.
Or is that just?
No, they'll always come after it. I'll hear it and go, for some reason, it'll prick my ears up, and I'll go, oh my god, and then after working out that I love the tune, then that hat will come on, and I'll try and work out why, as most people work out why it's so good, and then
it's a good one to finish with.
But both those last tunes, if you don't not that familiar, you need to source them out and listen to them in their entirety.
So we've put them on. They're on the Spotify page for the festival. All the tracks, and a lot of the tracks are quite long, but they're just let it play. It's really, really good altogether. So listen, I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and I hope you enjoyed it. I certainly did, and it's great. And I'd particularly like to thank Moo for joining us, because obviously they were getting ready for tonight. But it's been a pleasure to meet you, and it's been a pleasure for you to share, for us to hear your musical choices. So please, ladies and gentlemen, Moo.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good man. Thank you.
Having me.
Thank you for joining us for this episode. For more episodes, visit giaf.ie or find the First Thought podcast on any podcast platform. First Thought is presented in association with the University of Galway.